Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another Zero Bounce webinar. I'm Paul Leslie, content creator here at Zero Bounce, and today it's back to basics, email marketing and suppression. There is no need to be afraid today. Any question, anything you may wonder about spam, about email marketing compliance or suppression list management, we are going to have the answers for you. And if we don't answer a question for you, get in touch. We're going to find out. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our speakers. First, we have Brian Minnick. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Zero Bounce, host of many a webinar, guest of many a podcast. He is an email deliverability thought leader. He has more than 15 years of experience in tech and marketing. And to tell you a little bit about Zero Bounce, we are the #1 email verifier for 400,000 plus clients. Now, you might recognize some of those brands. I think I've heard of Amazon and Netflix, but you will see a number of brands there to your right, and I know that many of you all are Zero Bounce users as well. It's also our great pleasure to welcome back yet again Tom Wozniak, Chief Operating Officer at Optismo. They are delivering the industry's most robust platform for email compliance and suppression list management to clients throughout the US and around the world. Tom has an ability to put things in a way that's easy to understand. He just cuts right through the fluff and gets right to it. To tell you a little bit about Optismo Technologies, it is the recognized thought leader in the email and online marketing space for email suppression list management, email campaign management, data management, and risk mitigation services relative to email compliance. So as you can see, with these two gentlemen, we have a meeting of the minds, and we're going to cover a lot of subjects. I'm very curious, and I'm excited to learn myself. So let's get right to it. So tell us a little bit about what would you say is like the textbook definition of spam? How do we define it these days?
Brian, you want to take first shot at that one?
Sure. So we're only on email marketing, right, Paul? That's the topic for today. Just to be clear, we're just talking about email, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
No canned meat here.
Okay. So not all the junk mail that I sit on every day and throw in the garbage. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So spam is sending email to recipients that did not sign up for your emails or have any relevance towards what you are trying to accomplish. So for example, if you are sending cold outreach to someone that's not even in this industry, has no relevance towards you, this is spam. I definitely think this term is becoming broader, grayer, and obviously there's great companies like Tom and Optismo over here that's trying to help with this. But I think for the most part, and this one's tough for me, Paul, because I'll be very honest. When I think about spam, I think about it in a very negative manner, right? I think everybody does. It defaults to negative, and that's fair. I think that's very fair. Where I struggle is when there's really good business cases to do things, and the audience does resonate with it. However, not the entire audience resonates with it. That's for me where it gets really gray, and it's hard to determine and put your finger on and say, well, that's spam, but that's not. And so I struggle on that side, but I will definitely say sending too much mail, regardless, that's spam. And doing bad practices and things of that nature is definitely going to be the textbook spam for me. But Tom, I'm really interested to see how you see it, because you obviously see it from a compliance point of view. We see it from we're trying to grow revenue. We're like every other business, right? We are also doing things that we're trying to grow the business. And so I think there's that fine line that people dance on. What's really spam, what's not? I'd love to hear it from you as well.
Yeah, I think that was great. I wanted to hear what you had to say first, because I think spam is one of those terms where, again, taking the canned meat out of the equation, there's really not a complete agreement on what that means. It's very subjective to the individual, because I think if you really get down to it and you just talk to a person, like everybody, I think has in their own mind an understanding of, okay, spam. And I think it really comes down to it's email I don't want in the moment. So I think it's feasible under that kind of definition that, and again, this isn't a legal definition. This is just sort of, I think, a usage definition for most people. If something hits my inbox and in the moment that I look at it, it's not something I'm interested in. I don't remember signing up for it. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Doesn't really matter. I just don't like it. It seems to be cluttering my inbox. That's spam all of a sudden. Now, a week later or a week before, that same email might have been resonant for me. Maybe it was a special offer for something. Maybe it's like I get a Valentine's Day offer 2 days after Valentine's Day. Well, sounds like spam to me. I can't even, like, what's the point? But 2 days before, when it's the last minute, I'm like, oh crud, I totally forgot it was Valentine's Day and I need to get something quickly. That's not spam all of a sudden because it's useful to me then. So I think in the industry, depending on who you talk to, we get, again, also, I think sort of varying concept of what is spam. Certainly, anyone would agree, malware, spyware, phishing, that is all spam. That would all come under this, heading of very malicious email content, and anybody would put that under spam. But then again, you get to the, okay, it's a newsletter that I'm really not interested in reading anymore, but I'm still getting it. I haven't unsubscribed from it. Is that spam? Maybe. The marketing content that maybe is unsolicited, but once in a while is resonant, but a lot of times, most of the time, probably isn't. Spam, conceivable. So I think we really get to that point where it is very much, it's kind of in the eye of the beholder or recipient, I guess. I think that makes the conversation about the sort of the anti-spam conversation is complicated, because my first question when I talk to somebody about that is like, how are you defining it? Because if you're saying, if you're going to limit it to phishing, malware, spyware, 100%, like anybody wants to eradicate that. It's illegal. Anything, inbox providers can do to filter that out, make sure it doesn't hit the inbox. Everyone would agree. I think that's a positive. But if maybe it's just based on engagement. So it's low engagement email. And now you have anti-spam activity that's trying to filter that out and make that not get to the inbox. Well, it's like, that gets really subjective to the individual, because I know I've seen studies where, I can be receiving an email from a company for months and I never open it. I never really look at it, but I see it, but I also don't unsubscribe from it. But you know what? The reason is it's because it's a brand I'm going to probably buy from again when the time is right. So I don't mind, it just hits my promotions tab or whatever. But when that right offer comes, or around Christmas or that time of year when I'm going to buy from them, all of a sudden that's relevant again. But maybe it's just not that easy for me to subscribe to that company and their email program in a way that's the only time I receive it. So I just leave it in my inbox. And there are, studies that show just having it in your inbox is a likelihood that you're more likely to buy from them at a certain point. So I don't know. My very long roundabout way of saying, I don't feel like there is a universal definition of spam. It is super subjective within the limits that there are certain things I think we all agree fit the category.
Tom, it's interesting. And sorry, Paul, I'm sure you want to move on because there's a lot better topics. But I think about this also, and it's is it the content that actually defines, is it spam? So, and here's where my head's at. It's spinning, by the way, Tom. You always do this to me. But when I get all these flyers in the mail, improve your home, there's the AC company, a paver company, a window company, a blinds company. To me, that's spam in a sense, until the day I actually needed the plumber. Then I'm like, crap, where's that booklet that they sent me? Right. And so in that sense, it's very interesting. It's the content. And then I think about TV. Is that spam? All these commercials. Is that textbook spam? I didn't sign up for that. I didn't want that. I'm paying to actually view it, if you think about it. So, maybe it's the content is also a way to kind of think about it. And maybe for anyone listening, design your content to not be hard sales pitches. It should add value. It should add information. It should add something that someone can take away and remember you, not just think you're trying to shove a product or a service down their throats. So maybe that's also a decent way to kind of help think about it.
Yep, I like that.
Well, Brian, you're really touching on an interesting point. There's certain things that we all know, okay, this is spam. But there is this element of spam being in the eye of the beholder at times because, and this comes up in almost every webinar we do, the newsletter people, they have a certain idea about consent. But then we always get these people in sales and they're like, well, how do I break the ice? Like, I don't want to be a spammer, but I know that just sitting here is not going to, I'm not going to create anything that way. So when it comes to this consent idea, how do people proceed based on their industry?
Yeah, that's another interesting one because again, another way some people might define spam is there's bulk email, which is just sent to a massive list of maybe it's thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. Is that spam just based on the fact that it's sent to so many? But then, yeah, what about one-to-one, where the sales guy reaches out and potentially reaches out with something that you have absolutely no interest in? Brian, I'm sure you never get any emails like this because I certainly don't know. I haven't gotten 10 or 20 this morning. Nothing like that I've had to delete. Is that spam? I'm not interested in it. But it's not bulk, certainly. So from the standpoint of, we talk about, the laws around email marketing, and a cold one-to-one email marketing outreach from a salesperson at some SaaS company or, whatever, or event marketing company reaches out to me. I didn't give them consent. I've never heard of their company before, but they've reached out. In the United States, that's certainly legal as long as I haven't told them to stop. On one-to-one, it becomes a little questionable about whether can spam really applies because it's devoted to commercial email, which is typically thought of as bulk marketing email, and one-to-one is often pushed aside as said as something somewhat different, even again if there's an intent to sell something within it, but it's one-to-one. So yeah, I think the concept of consent it gets really interesting, and certainly we're in a data privacy environment globally and in the United States where the concept of consent is becoming more and more a talking point. We've seen very restrictive data privacy laws go into effect in other countries like GDPR in the European Union, and the various state level data privacy laws here in the States that limit how companies can collect, store, use consumer data with or without consent. So I don't know. I have no specific answers to how we look at the concept of consent. Just that it's one that I think it's always been evolving, but we're in a time when that evolution is I think there's a lot of things happening there, especially on the legal and regulatory front.
I feel like there's so much gray area here where I'll give real examples about Zero Bounce because we are in this space too, right? We're all, again, the audience, our audience are doing the same things we're doing, trying to grow their business, trying to expand and trying to grow, right? That's their initiatives. And so, for example, we send emails to people who sign up offering kind of consultations or one-to-one, real time. Let's talk about your case, right? Is that considered spam? I don't think so. Are those considered spam by some viewers? I'm sure they are, by the way, and I'm not ignorant to that. However, we're not out cold emailing lists that people are soliciting towards us that we're purchasing, and we have no idea where it came from. That to me is all necessary, for the most part, not going to be good. But when there's targeting involved, I think that gets interesting. Is that consent? Is that not? There's certainly not consent. But I'll tell you what's really frustrating me and where consent gets thrown out of the window is when you guys are using these third-party services and they are grabbing somehow they have connect. This is frustrating as heck. They connect my personal information to my business. And so I intentionally am set up with separated business line from phone line, intentionally set up different email channels, intentionally social channels are changed because I want separation. I'm a human too. And so I actually can really value where consent comes into play here. When you hit me on my personal line and I'm expecting a phone call for something important and all of a sudden it's a sales pitch to Zero Bounce, but I've never given that number out. I know I never give that number out. And then I get the pitches there. I'm immediately hunting down, how'd you get my number? Where did this come from? And I'm going to go kind of take the channel. So I think there has to be, follow the proper channels. I think that's something that's important. I think there's business is getting a little invasive on the personal side, if you were to ask me. Even the targeting, like I'm on my own social media, I'm getting all this business targeting. I understand that's tough to do it. But when it comes to email, I mean, as soon as you start to email my personal Gmail account, my personal accounts that have nothing to do with business, they never have, I've never submitted them to anything. That to me is where it starts to step over the line. Now I'm actually going to get upset at you. I'm going to get frustrated with you. You hit my work email, give me an unsubscribe or whatever it is. Cool. I'll follow the procedures. I'm on board. That's fine. Do your thing. You might have hit me at the right time. I might reply to you. But I really think there's this line that people are crossing over when it comes to consent. So maybe you do have my consent to talk to me on business, but then you go to a third-party service and map my personal cell phone, my home address, sending me direct mail, this type of stuff. Now I think that's crossing the line. And that gets a little too much in my, at least in my point of view, where it doesn't have to be there. If I wanted it, if you got me on my business channel, I'm going to reply, right?
Yep.
And so I think people should be conscious of that, because I'm going to really go after you in a sense. And Tom, from a compliance standpoint, I'm pretty sure I have a good case, right? So, I think it's just important to share this stuff with audience, because I'm constantly targeted. Tom, you're constantly targeted. And that's fine. I think I understand the game. This is fine. I get it. But let's do it the right way. And I definitely think we need separation between business and personal. I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree. That's, targeted marketing has always been, a gray area, or, has always had this challenge of where's the line, where the targeting gets a little either creepy, like, oh, wait, they know way too much about me. That can be just in your personal, kind of arena, or the connection between business and personal. But, we've all seen that marketing or seen examples of it over the years. Wasn't there I think it's an urban myth, but where, a daughter was searching for, something, baby clothes or something, because she was pregnant, and then dad got on the computer and was getting retargeted with all kinds of, stuff that made it clear that his daughter was pregnant, something along those lines. And obviously, whoa, hold on a second, we have a problem here. So we've certainly seen instances where, the amount of data that companies have access to about us as consumers or potential customers can be a little much, especially when people fully understand. Now, those of us in marketing, I think we've all, for better or worse, just sort of accepted, if a company wants to know something about me and I've ever put it out there anywhere, yep, okay, it's findable and connectable, and they can do it. Whether it's legal for them or not isn't really the question. It's just physically, is it a possibility? Yeah, for sure. And so I think it is that it behooves businesses that, want to maintain good reputations, good relationships with their customers and prospects, to figure out where that line is and not cross it, and probably not go too close to it. Like, there's certainly things I think that everybody can be like, that's over the line. And maybe what you want to do then is stay well back of that and not get into that gray area of, like you said, crossing over where, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, I know you wanted to reach out to me on business, but now you're getting me on my personal email or my personal phone. No, that's not going to be cool. And I think most people would agree with that that's a breach of that line, wherever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does seem to be happening more and more.
Mm-hmm.
But since you guys are talking about this line, something that comes up so much is people want to know about opt-out. They want to know about unsubscribe. A lot of the newsletter people, they know it. They know, okay, if you're sending your regular marketing emails, you got to have a way for people to get off. But the people who are sending the more sales emails, they're starting to delve into, should I have an unsubscribe button? And some of them are thinking like, no, I don't know. Should I add it? Because if I do it, maybe it will make it look like it's spam, when really I'm just trying to make a business to business or even a personal connection. So what kind of light can you shine on this?
Yeah, great question. And it is murky in certain areas. Now, fortunately, we do have, again, the Can-Spam Act of 2003 kind of sets aside the specific requirements for commercial email, and how commercial email must include a way for people to opt out. These days, that is an opt-out link of some sort. Back in the day, it might have been an email address you replied to, but technology today, you just click on that, and it can be as simple as you click on it, one click, you're done, or you may need to confirm your request, enter your email address, all these different things. Those are all within the realm of following the rules. But that's commercial email. So how does that apply to, again, these one-to-one sales emails that we've talked about? That gets a little gray from a legal standpoint. Again, caveat, I'm not an attorney. While I work for a compliance company, and I know a lot about this. Please don't anybody take any of this as actual legal advice. If you are building an email program and want to make absolutely sure you are following the laws, please consult your attorney and get proper advice on this. Okay, with that said, when you get into, we've all, I think Brian and I, all of us have received those one-to-one sales emails. Sometimes they do include an unsubscribe link. I generally appreciate that personally, because I don't have to reply to them and say, please take me off your list. I can just click the link and be done. I think myself, best practice on those they are sales emails, they are marketing emails, whether they're one-to-one or mass, they still fit that category to me. I, as the recipient, don't know whether I'm one of 1,000 people who got a version of this email through HubSpot or some other CRM, or if it really is the sales guy just sitting down in Gmail and typing out an email to me, or using a macro to do it and sending it specifically to me one at a time. There's no way for me to know that, really. So I like to see a way for me to easily tell them, yeah, you know what, your offer is not relevant to me. I'm not interested, and I don't want it anymore. So please stop. At that point, it certainly behooves them to honor that request. And I think if they're putting it in there, they're often kind of accepting the responsibility to follow the rules. And if you unsubscribe, yeah, they're probably obligated to honor that request, whether the initial email fully fell under canned spam or not. I think certainly ethically they are. But the ones that aren't, that don't include the link, they're not necessarily breaking a law. It might just be that they're breaking a best practice. That, again, we'd like to see those links because we like it as recipients of the sales content to be able to easily unsubscribe from it. But then we get into other areas of business email. Like, what about the transactional email? So I get an invoice from my internet provider every month. Can I opt out from receiving that? I mean, they have to be able to bill me, so I can't opt out of billing per se. I could change they may offer me a way to change preferences and say, no, I just want you to mail it to me, because I prefer paper as opposed to email. But those typically, or say when I bought something and I'm going to receive an email confirming the purchase, can't necessarily, there's no requirement that says those companies have to give me a way to opt out of those things. Those are transactional emails within a business operation. And as a customer, they have every right to reach out to me, whether I've said, yeah, I don't want your stuff, don't contact me. But in those business dealings, they are well within their right to do so. But they may not be able to send me marketing emails if I've opted out of those. So again, it gets into that, like you said, newsletters. Clearly, if I click on that link and unsubscribe, yeah, you need to stop sending me that stuff. But I think the rule of thumb for companies in thinking about whether they, do they fall into the category of commercial email that would be regulated under canned spam, is if there's marketing in it, if there's advertising, trying to sell something, best to err on the side that, yep, you should probably be complying with this, and just give people a way to opt out. It's good practice regardless. And you're going to, in my mind, build more goodwill with your recipients if you just give them that opportunity.
It's interesting. So I agree with you. I think what's interesting, and the more conversations I have with people around it, because Tom, we deal with different people, right? We deal with, I'm dealing with sales managers, I'm dealing with marketing managers, I'm dealing with CEOs trying to push the business, right? So what I've been able to do is aggregate their thoughts and put it into a very different perspective, which is the biggest problem I actually see with all of this is that these teams are not communicating. And marketing, generally speaking, is trying their best to do it in the best practices. I firmly believe that. I don't see a lot of abuse there. Actually, I see almost too much, not too much. That's the wrong way to say it, but definitely, defaulting to safety on the marketing side, sales defaulting towards aggression, right? And so the issue that I see, and if people can think about it in a certain way and break this down, is what's really helpful. Trying to get my thought together on how to properly say this, but if marketing and sales actually had a conversation and said, hey, what's your objectives on both sides? And marketing is going to tell you it's nurturing, it's info share, it's product announcements, etc. And sales is going to tell you, well, plain and simple, it's revenue, right? It's customers and it's revenue. Okay, great. How do we work together to not step on each other's toes and chop off each one of our arms as we're working? And so to me, the solution is having categories of marketing communications that you can be opted out of. So for example, marketing, if they start seeing all these unsubscribes coming from the sales channel, they're going to get frustrated, and they should, because they're like, I worked so hard to get these people. And now they could be great for my blog, my newsletter, whatever, but you're chopping off my ankles here as I'm trying to march because you're sending these cold emails and they don't want them. They're soliciting emails. Having a preference saying, hey, I still want the newsletter, but I don't want your, sales tactic. That's whatever you call it, but I'm trying to keep it simple for sake of audience, how they think about it. Communication and aligning on a plan, I think, is actually incredibly powerful. And so then marketing can keep marching, sales can do what they want to do, and then give people the option to opt out of sales related emails. They can't send to them anymore, but marketing still can. To me, this is a major win, and it's not really, I don't hear anyone talking about it. I just hear them talking about sales wants to sell more, marketing wants better performance. That's all I ever hear. And it's funny because marketing is always thinking about deliverability. Marketing's always thinking about a lot of things, and sales is thinking about volume. Always. This is textbook for me. I see it every day. And if they would just communicate and say, how do we both accomplish our goals at the same time without stepping on each other's toes, I think it'd actually be much more productive and probably solve a lot more problems. But on the transactional side, Tom, because you did touch on this and I wanted to mention a few things, from a deliverability standpoint, which is really where my background, my knowledge, and my experience is really coming into play, those are the best emails you can possibly send, because no one's reporting receipts as spam. Generally, they might click to download and get as a PDF to send off to accounting. These are like signals that are very powerful for your reputation, your deliverability. And I encourage people to send the transactional emails. They'll say, oh, well, should I? I'm not sure. Is it annoying? If it's annoying, let them shove it into a folder or opt out through a preference, but default it on, because it's really going to help you. Because no one's. I don't mark my receipts as spam. That's first off, that's not cool. Right. I want them. I need them for whatever reason. So there's ways to think about that too. But I would highly encourage marketing and sales to just sit down, have a conversation, align on your goals, because you both have a good mission, by the way, and figure out the best way to move forward. Without chopping the whole thing off at the floor.
Yep. Yeah. And, you make a great point. And I think the nice thing about it is it's really easy to, from an email opt-out standpoint, to set up a process just like that, where the general term is a preference center. So instead of it's just, if I click this link, I've opted out from everything other than transactional that a company could ever send me. No, I click on a link, and then I go to a small page that says, okay, what kind of stuff do you want to receive or not receive from us? And that's where, the consumer or the customer gets to go, okay, I want special offer emails, don't want, we'll call it hard sales emails, for lack of a better term. I want the newsletter, but I don't want, this, new product feature, kind of thing, whatever it is. But give people the option. If you kind of have to then bucket your emails and decide as a group, between sales and marketing, like, how do we categorize the different types of email content that we're sending, and put those into those groups, and then let people decide what they want to receive or not receive. I think it's certainly, when you have a more robust, complex email program, that can make a ton of sense, because otherwise, you really do get into the yes or no, just a binary choice.
Yeah.
There's so much for people to know. They need to know about GDPR compliance. They need to know about unsubscribing. What is a one-click unsubscribe? They need to know about authentication, and then there's email validation. But it all comes down to the basics, and I think that the basics are connected to all these things. What would you guys say is really the ABCs, the basics of email marketing?
Well, good one. All right, I'll start it. So basics of email marketing. Number one, collect data in the proper ways. Source your data naturally and organically through your sign-up forms, your newsletter sign-ups, registrations, trade shows, etc. However you're doing it. Consent. Maybe that's the easiest way to think about it. To me, that's obviously 101. A lot of people start to veer off the track, by the way, already at this point. So hang tight. I think there are channels for you, but maybe LinkedIn's a better channel for your your prospecting and things like that, which, by the way, I'm expecting that stuff there. Just want you guys all to know that I'm expecting it there. Am I responding to all of it? No, but I'm not going to go through and start to try to figure out how to, give you bad reputation because you don't follow good practices. It's just, I understand that's part of LinkedIn. Anyway, for me, I Tom, you're going to probably just laugh. As soon as I hear EU, the answer is no. Like, unless I have clear consent, they opted in. And by the way, I think even consent now and, this copy ditto Tom's disclaimer from before. I'm not a legal attorney, blah, blah, blah. I think we can't even default the checkbox on to accept newsletter signups on our registration page. It has to be off. You have to explicitly click it to enable it. So that's another kind of challenging one, because I think I even remember going, guys, what are you doing? Turn this back. This should be defaulted on. Nope, we can't. Okay. EU, GDPR, you got it. I'm out of the picture. You just say the words. Say those 4 letters. I'm out. So we kind of default everything GDPR. Don't dance around it. It's don't dance around the line. Stay back. Stay far away. But I think, obviously honoring the unsubscribes, that's incredibly important. Honoring when people do reply saying, stop emailing me, incredibly important. But making sure you're also sending to people that are engaging. So back on the deliverability side, I think your deliverability is going to be measured by the outcome of your campaigns. It's correlated. So when nobody's opening your emails and no one's replying to your emails, you shouldn't have good deliverability. No one wants it, right? And so removing the people that are not engaging with you over a certain amount of time, for all, it's hard to put the date on that. I get that question a lot. When should I stop emailing somebody? I don't know is the truth. I would argue after 60, 90 days, absolutely no activity, you might move them into a slower sequence. And then eventually hit them on a breakup sequence of some sort. Like, is this it? Are we done? You're not engaging. I don't want to keep sending you mail. So timing, I think you have to play it by ear. I think you have to, you can have some foundations on it, but it can't be textbook after 2 years. I think that's probably too late. And in some markets, that's way too late. However, let me give you an example, because I just was talking to somebody about this. Taxes. They're not sending emails in July and August and September. They are, but they're like, I can't even, what happens with this thing? What am I doing? At the end of the day, every one of my customers thinks about me in January and February. March, now they're panicking. And April, it's just like the clients, right? I haven't done it. My papers aren't ready. And so I think about that, right? And I'm like, that's actually a really good point. But if I were to have this process, this is, I unsubscribe everyone after 6 months, they might lose their entire database, right? And so is that a good practice? No, I would argue no. And so I really think the timing has to be subjective to your business or whatever you're doing. Put thought into it. Put your customer hat back on. Be your own customer. And when would you be engaging? Maybe you sell Valentine's Day flowers as your big thing. It might take you 2 months before someone ever opens your email again. I don't want the flower email on Saturday. I don't want it after the day after Valentine's Day. I want it before Valentine's Day. So, think about stuff like that and add rules in place with that. But I think for the most part, that's the 101 to me. And I think most people are already following those. And just be thoughtful. That's where I think, take a second, lay out a plan, visualize it. I don't know, whatever your learning capability, whatever your learning channel is, put it down, consult with other departments, make sure it aligns with what they're doing too, and then move forward. But collect data the right ways, Try not to purchase data. Certainly don't purchase from solicited emails trying to sell you data. My gosh, from Outlook emails on top of it. And just do the best practices. Let people out of your lists.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's a really good overview. I think it does start with it's that understanding that, again, in the US, you can send unsolicited email, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea. And for so many reasons, deliverability being one, long-term engagement. Depending on your business, it could certainly make sense in some ways, but the concept of the old days of just, buying a list from somewhere online of, 10 million email addresses and then just blasting at it, that doesn't, one, it's not going to work any kind of long term, because the inbox providers are not going to go along with that. They're going to notice that kind of activity and you're going to get penalized for it, but it's just not good long term business. So, if your goal is to build a business, then build a list of people that want to receive your content, and then follow the rules 100%. Obviously, being a compliance company, that's going to be paramount. Stay in compliance. It's not difficult, but you have to be aware of the rules, and then make sure you're monitoring to ensure that you're following them. There are some that are fairly easy to set up and not have to look at them constantly. And those, it would be things like setting up your, having an opt-out link, collecting opt-outs, honoring them. That can all be done in a very automated fashion, and typically is through a company like ours or through your ESP. But, ensuring that you're not sending deceptive subject lines, that you're not, getting into other areas where your content is misleading or in any way confusing to the recipient. Don't do it. It's, again, the short-term gains that you might or might not get from that aren't going to be worth it for the long-term hit to your reputation or potential legal repercussions. And then, maybe to just build on what Brian talked about is, your content. Focus on delivering content that your recipients want to receive and will respond to. And that, can be, obviously at the end of the day, most of this is marketing content. Companies want customers to buy something at some point. Most of this isn't nonprofit. So somewhere in there is going to be a call to action to get people to convert and make a purchase, download something, fill out a lead form, whatever it is. But surrounding all of that, make the content valuable and engaging. Get people interested in it so that they don't look at your email on a regular basis as spam. And I think focus on those things. And if you do all of those things and think about things, the concept of purging your list for non-engagement is, just like you said, Brian, it is so business specific. The tax example is right on the money. It's like, if you followed the best practice of, okay, well, if somebody hasn't responded in 6 months or opened anything, well, I should just dump them from my email list. Well, you Mr. Tax preparer, you just destroyed your entire business, because now you can't reach out to all of your past customers come tax time next year because you purged them all because they haven't opened anything in, almost a year. Totally normal. But in businesses where you're sending out content that is actionable on a more regular basis, then you may want to look at that more carefully, and at a minimum, slow your cadence down for people who are just not engaging. So a lot of that aspect of the ABCs does become, relevant to what is your business. And so a lot of it is, understand delivering good content, but understand how that all aligns with what your business model is.
I think a lot of people, they still have a fear. They think of their email list as something like money. And so somebody doesn't engage for, let's say, 2 months. And they say, oh, there's a bunch of people like that. And they get into this mindset where they start to think like, oh no, I worked so hard to get these emails. What kind of a reframe do they need to look at this and understand that what they should do about emails that just don't seem to be engaging?
Yeah, I know people in the email marketing space. You'll get really smart people, way smarter than I am in terms of running effective email campaigns. I've been doing it for a long time, who will be at opposite ends of the spectrum on something like this, where one person will say, yep, you know what, general practice, barring something strange like a business model that is an annual purchase. If somebody hasn't engaged with my emails in such and such a way within 90 days, 6 months, whatever it is, yep, I'm going to put them into an inactive, list, and I'm going to stop emailing them. And then you've got somebody on the other end of the spectrum who will say, I never stop emailing, period. Now, you talk to that person and you get a little more in detail. It's not that they're continuing to send the same stuff over and over and over again and just like banging their head against the wall. They will move people into different sequences, but they're never, unless somebody unsubscribes, they're not going to remove them permanently from a list for just that reason that you mentioned, where it's like, but I put so much effort into getting these people to sign up in the first place. There's value in the email address. I don't want to lose that, because maybe 2 years from now, they're going to make a purchase again. And if I just purge them, well, I'm never going to get that purchase. I think there's validity in both of those positions. Again, I think it does come down to, the business model you have, but there does certainly come a time, I think myself, I land somewhere in the middle of that, which says, if truly someone hasn't engaged in anything I've sent them for a long period of time, I got to at least put them in a different list and change and stop sending them the normal things. If nothing else, it's clear that what I'm sending them is not interesting. They're not engaging with it. So I'm doing something wrong. So minimum is I need to change up the way I reach out to these people. If I don't, you may not be just stopping entirely, but yeah, they need different content. Like, boy, whatever the offers that I'm sending, or just the interesting newsletter, stories, blog posts, whatever, they don't seem to care. What else do I have? What else, how can I go at them with something, try to bring them something different that they will click on and open and get engaged with. So then I think it's, as a marketer, you take those unengaged people and you get creative with them and see if there's ways to get them to re-engage with your brand.
It's a good one, Tom. The only thing I could add to it would be, as much as open rates are no longer a great metric, they're still a metric. Mm-hmm. And so the only thing that can happen is what I'm seeing, at least. The only thing that can happen is they get inflated. They're not going to deflate. They will inflate, right? But if you have no engagement and you're trying to figure out why, you can still use open rate to get some sort of idea as to, is it me or is it them? And so I think so, right? I'm not saying this is perfect, but for people that are confused, is it me or is it them? Because I get that question a lot. Like, is it my marketing or is it my audience? And that's is it me or is it them? If it's you, open rates to me tell you something. There's still a metric that is considered to be an indicator. It's not performance indication, but it's an indicator. Could mean a few things. Number one, if your numbers are very low, you might not even be in the inbox at this point, because the Apple programs and all of this, they're still opening it, but they're not opening from spam. So if your numbers are high, that's at least positive, saying, hey, you're probably at least in the inbox. So that's a good thing. Okay, cool. That's an is it me problem, by the way. That's not is it them. So you need to go back and look, is this a quality, deliverability issue, whatever. But subject lines are so important. They are so important. And, we work with a few different companies, and I love this guy, Jay, over at Outcome Media and Guru. This guy, I don't know what it is, but every time he sends me an email, I have to open it. And I think it's because of the mindset of the writer. It's not about me as the writer. It's about you as the audience. And if you can get your head in that spot and really dial it in with creativity, you can change the whole thing. And so it's kind of like delivering a message, right? I've heard this many different ways. One person can deliver a message and this other person can deliver a message. You can have the same exact message delivered differently. The outcomes are drastically different. It's the same exact message. And so I do feel the subject line is an indicator on something like that, to at least, open rates. It can at least help you. I'm not saying it's the solution, but if you have no engagement, it has to start with an open, by the way. You can't engage. You can't just go to a click. You can't just go to an unsubscribe. They have to open it to get there. So think about that too. There might be some areas of improvement that you can use, and go use some of these tools that evaluate it, suggest, It's sometimes just concept of the subject line, by the way. It's that you're trying to shove too much of your desire down their throat versus getting them to open their mouth because they want it, right? They're like, yes, I need this content. This is exactly what I want it for. So switch the hat, put on your customer hat, and figure out the way to make it work for them.
Really good stuff here. So what is a suppression list and how do I use one?
So, at its core, a suppression list is in the context of email marketing, is simply a list of email addresses that for one reason or another, you do not want to mail, or you do not want partners to mail, whatever the case might be. Certainly that's going to include anybody who's opted out. They are essentially automatically on the most important suppression list you have, which is the one that you need to stay compliant with the law. Can't email those folks. But suppression lists can go far beyond that because, for example, when you get into the specifics of a particular campaign. So we've all probably experienced this where the cable companies back in the day were always famous for you have offers that are available to new customers. Funny thing is they are not available to your current customers, but they are much, much better than what your current customers have or can get. So if you don't want upset current customers, it's a really good idea to do everything in your power to make sure they never see those ultra aggressive new customer offers. So in email, if you were sending out an email campaign focused on driving new customer signups, the last thing you want to do is send it to any of your current customers. At best, you're going to get a bunch of them asking for the special offer, which you may then feel obligated to give them. At worst, they're going to be really ticked off when they try to get the offer and your customer service people are like, oh, no, sorry, you don't qualify. You can't have it. But Joe over here, who hasn't been a loyal customer, and we're going to give him the fantastic deal. You've been with us for 10 years, so you get bupkis. So that's an extremely common suppression file for companies to use in their email campaigns. And then it's also, suppression files can be a great way of dialing in your targeting. So depending on how your databases are set up, it may be very simple to select just the people you want to speak to with an email campaign. But depending on how that data is structured, it may actually be more convenient, efficient to decide who you don't want to send to. And so then it's really about, all right, let's just pull these people out of the list because it's easier to identify them than it is to identify the people that we want. You get to the same place at the end, but it sometimes is just a more efficient way to do it. So it could be, whether it's demographics or geographics, any kind of data you might want to use to target. It just depends, and that may be another way to do it. But at its most simple, a suppression file does just what it says. It is a list of folks who will be suppressed from that email campaign for whatever reason.
Two things. Number one, not letting the existing customers get the same offer as the new customers. To me, the most insane concept that somebody thought with only their business hat. Like, did you think about retention? Did you think about churn? Did you think about all this other stuff? Anyway, sorry for the rant, because sure, I'm just going to go to the other provider instead. So that's what you're encouraging because they're offering the discount because it's new. And then you guys play this ping pong game. I hate this, by the way. I've done the ping pong game. And I actually applied this to Zero Bounce. I want to be super clear. I couldn't stand this concept. And so it was like, we sent out all these offers and people are like, oh, well, I'm an existing customer. Can I get it? Of course you can. Like, that's always the answer. Of course you can, because you're like, what do I want you to go somewhere else? I've never understood this concept. I really never understood this. That's how you fire up your own crowd, right? To march against you. We want advocates, not enemies. And so anyway, all right, enough with that rant. The only other part on suppression lists that I think is important, and a lot of people, I think, me being on operations and being in systems my whole life, one of the things that I've noticed, if it wasn't for conscious thinking, people often just leave their suppression list behind. So I switch platforms from platform A to platform B, whatever it is, doesn't matter. They're hosting that suppression list, unless you're using a great company like Optismo that's going to centralize it for you. But if you're not, then you're now relying on each of those individual softwares to manage that suppression list in whatever format they're doing it. And what I commonly see is people move the data but they don't move suppression. And so now all of a sudden you go and email all these people that opted out from platform A, but by the way, platform B has no clue that that took place. So it's a problem that people kind of not intentionally do, but it's commonly an afterthought. And generally you only see it after a lot of people complain saying I've already opted out or whatever it might be, or the legal complaint comes. That's another hairy one. But so be conscious of that, you know, and again, this is why Optismo exists, for problems like that. I've had these conversations with Tom, you know, around it. And so think about that. It's commonly done because people are switching platforms all the time because there's incentives to do this as well. Because, you know, people don't want to keep their existing customer base for whatever genius idea came up with that one. But anyway, that's a big one. So don't forget to move that suppression list over if you're coming from a different platform, or again, look to centralize it where every platform is talking to that centralized suppression list.
Can you tell us, are there any updates as it relates to GDPR or CASL, C-A-S-L?
I'm not aware of any particularly recent changes to either of those. I think somewhat similar. Well, CAN spam has been around a really long time. The updates to CAN spam tend to be define gets higher, you know, every couple of years. It's given a review, and that initial $10,000 per email in violation fine is now up to, you know, over $40,000. So I wouldn't be shocked if the fine amounts have gone up. That'd be a logical thing for those to change. But the core pieces of those pieces of legislation, to my knowledge, haven't dramatically changed in recent years. You know, there's still the consent requirement. There are obviously, you know, CASL, like CAN spam, is email specific, where GDPR is much more wide ranging, and it's all about data. Any kind of data, especially related to marketing. Email just happens to be, you know, one of the channels that is impacted by it. So it's GDPR is a lot broader, a lot more complicated, more difficult for companies to comply with potentially. But from at least my, you know, staying on top of those things, there haven't been new updates that have required companies to really change the way they're already complying with the rules.
I just think it's confusing, to be very honest. So for example, by the way, another disclaimer, quick one. I'm not in compliance or security, but I have an amazing compliance and security team that is incredibly detailed and over the top for the best reasons, by the way. But one thing I noticed, or I started hearing chatter about, and if this maybe applies to you, maybe you should at least know, it was like the privacy shield. It became, it was invalidated. Now it's validated back again. So data can move. And I remember our compliance team just going, when it got invalidated, our compliance team said, nope, we're maintaining the certification. I don't care. And because who knows what's going to happen, elections, law, etc. And we did. And then it was a good thing that we did stuff like that. But it's confusing. You know, at least from my point of view, I think it's confusing. And I think for business owners and business people trying to run the business, it's confusing. And so definitely consult the right people, which are attorneys and compliance people. But, you know, there are things changing there. And I think it's only going to get worse in a sense of change. India had a big bill that was looking like it was going to hit the table. PDP, I believe it was called, the Personal Data Protection Act of India. They didn't want data moving out of India. They were trying to ultimately push businesses to host more data in India. That was kind of the business concept, the way to do it. It's a lot. It's a lot, is what I would say. Just make sure you have the right people around you and the right people to consult. That's definitely something you should be doing.
Yeah. I think, you know, when GDPR came up, I, you know, educated myself on it, went to some conferences in the UK. Now they're not even in the EU, but back then they were. So just speaking of things that change quickly. And yeah, it's immensely complicated, and companies were very confused and remain that way today, even ones who stay very on top of it. But just like you mentioned, the ability to move data in and out of the EU, move it to the United States, move it back. There were processes you could follow that were made that acceptable. And then all of a sudden those processes weren't there anymore. And then they were essentially replaced. And so, yeah, it's just smart just to have access to experts who can help you navigate these things, especially on a global perspective. It's hard enough just in the United States with 20 now states having different data privacy laws, and that fortunately none of them technically, to my knowledge, contradict each other, but they are not all the same. And so it's defaulted to, okay, who's the most restrictive? Oh, it's California and Colorado. Okay, as long as we as a company are compliant with those, we're pretty sure we're compliant with Massachusetts and everybody else. That's probably pretty good, but that only stays until some other state comes along and passes something that's more restrictive or something changes. So it is more imperative probably than ever before for companies to have, access to expertise in data privacy compliance across the board. And it's not going to get any simpler. It's only going to get more complicated.
Well, we've covered a lot of very actionable information. We've gone back to the basics and then some. Brian, Tom, what do you say to that person out there who says, but I don't want the webinar to be over?
I mean, that's everybody, right?
Come shoot me a message on LinkedIn.
Just keep talking, guys. I'm sure who doesn't love the sound of our melodious voices.
Anything you guys want to say in closing here?
I just want to thank everyone for anybody joining. Any questions specifically, if I touched on it, you're always welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email, but LinkedIn, I tend to see it quicker, to be very honest. I get a ton of email. So yeah, just want to thank everyone for joining today.
I'll say exactly the same.
Well, Tom Wozniak, Brian Minnick, it's been a great pleasure. And thank you everyone for tuning in.